Folks, from the panel format of that particular discussion, we're going to move on to another series of conversations about differing topics. I'd like to invite onto the stage our next group, Brian McEnery of the ACCA, please onto the stage. Alec Gardner and Hannes Lieber, please join us on the stage. Gents and audience, we're going to hopefully keep these presentations to 15 minutes each if we might, because the time is running out on us so far this afternoon. So if we can keep these ones short and crisp, that would be much appreciated. Let's begin, if you would. Brian McEnery is the Global President of ACCA. His topic this afternoon is governance.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to talk about a different type of culture now. We're going to talk about corporate culture and the area of corporate governance. And if I can, before I get into it, it sounds a little abstract. But I can assure you, corporate governance and corporate culture is not abstract, because it is about the moral compass that's set by you and by me. And talking about corporate and business culture, I believe it applies equally to society, and that is set by politicians and by policymakers. The very same principles apply. As you'll see when I go through my presentation, culture is set at the top and it permeates downwards, and it's the type of people in this room who set the culture of organizations. I'm the president of ACCA, and I'd like to outline to you this afternoon what I hope will be a very useful toolkit for you and for your organizations. And it is a corporate culture diagnostic toolkit. You can get it on our website, and you can do a self-diagnosis of how healthy the culture is in your organization. Corporate culture is about making good decisions for today, for tomorrow, and for the longer term. Some portray ethical leadership as being a bit goody-goody. But I say ethical decision-making is about avoiding dangerous risks that might look alluring in the short term, but can be devastating in the longer term. So need I remind you of the financial crisis of the last decade? And to give you an example of the country where I come from, Ireland, we had 5 domestic, what were determined as systemically important banks. And between them, all 5 of them accumulated 74 billion, or 8.3 trillion rupees of non-performing loans. And that was the level of bad governance that led to such a catastrophic collapse in the banking system in my country. And as I travel as ACCA Global President around the world, I can see the same in so many other countries: Greece, Cyprus, Spain, Portugal, the United States, to mention but a few. And I can assure you that the fundamental premise underlying those catastrophic failures was bad governance and was bad corporate culture. Many people's life savings were eliminated by that banking collapse. General taxation in my country rose by 10% as a consequence. Banks were nationalized, and I can only say that the governance systems of those entities failed miserably. It led to the herd mentality of aggressive lending, concentration risk, and of course, a bonus culture. And a bonus culture is not clearly a good corporate culture. I believe, and ACCA believes, that good governance is about achieving longer-term success. founded on economic efficiency, sustainable growth, and financial stability. Yes, it is about profitability, but not solely. It's about stakeholder gain and all the stakeholders gaining. It's about demonstrating leadership, it's about generating trust, and it's about creating value. And I'm sure that you will all agree with me that the key to a good corporate governance structure and a good corporate culture is that our employees are fundamentally engaged in it. And all the evidence, I mean, this is the real test. As business people, all the evidence shows entrepreneurs with good governance are more successful and more profitable. And fundamentally, as business people focused on success and profitability, that has got to be a very key message, that good governance is good business. There's much thinking about corporate governance and many codes, and indeed the OECD is a thought leader in that regard. But I think that the ACCA's new toolkit is a very welcome addition to the thinking and to the thought leadership around corporate culture and corporate governance. And I say to you that accountants have a key role in shaping and improving corporate culture. Accountants are highly qualified, and as professionals who rise to the height of the organization and the so-called C-suite, we can not only preach, but indeed implement good governance and good governance cultures. ACCA's interest in this space goes back for many decades, because as an accounting body around the world, we demand the highest ethical standards of our members, and if those standards slip, we as a regulatory body will take disciplinary action against our members. That is our promise to businesses, to governments and others who rely on ACCA accountants. Accountancy is the language of business. It's a global language, and it's a global landscape. And I think the uniqueness of ACCA in that context is that we are spread over 180 countries. And our mission is to force ethics and good conduct, so is not to force it. In actual fact, it is to encourage, to demonstrate, and to convert members and non-members to the merits of good business practice on the basis of the merits themselves. There aren't exact rules as to what good governance exactly looks like for every situation, and so as a consequence, we are all tasked with using our sound professional judgment to any of the circumstances might present in front of us. I believe, for all the accountants who are in this room, that we have a responsibility and an obligation to be a beacon of advocating good practice in corporate culture. And I believe that ACCA has led the way on corporate culture for many years, and we call it culture and challenging corporate behavior. There's plenty of evidence in recent times that corporate governance and culture has slipped. Whether it's Volkswagen in Germany, Olympus in Japan, the scandals surrounding FIFA, Toshiba, and many, many more, it clearly shows we've got to be ever vigilant, because when these corporate failures occur, they can be truly devastating for the stakeholders that are associated with those entities. And from the research around some of those entities, We believe that there is a clear line between corporate wrongdoing and weaknesses in the corporate culture of those entities. So, where to start? Well, to start, you do so at the top. It's very clear, if it isn't strong at the top, it won't permeate down through an organization. From the board and the senior management, it is important that they set the tone. And the tone can be both formal and informal, but it's got to be around good business practice. And as a result of that research that we have undertaken, we have developed this toolkit. Culture is made up of the things we can and can't see. So we can see, for instance, training is important, policies is important, appraisals, pay structures, but also things that mightn't be readily visible to us are important. Like, is there peer pressure in the organization? Is there bullying in the organization? Is there a lack of clarity around the organizational identity? Well, if there is peer pressure and bullying, it is important to observe it and to stamp it out. The behavior and culture of an organization is the mode by which an organization delivers on its goals. And so, isn't it one of the most fundamental things that a group of business people should be talking about, considering, and hopefully, through the toolkit, measuring? This is the graphic around the overall toolkit. So, at the very center is the core leadership. And that's about setting the tone at the top. It's about developing a mission and the values of the organization. And it's about performance management and the communications from the top, both internally and externally. They're the type of key messages and tone that's set by the executive and the board. The layer in the middle, we call them the governance lenses, and they help analyze the corporate culture in a systematic way. And 4 of those 5, if you can see them on the screen, they're well known in many different governance frameworks. But actually the 5th, which is the interconnectedness one, is one that ACCA believes is important, and it's one that we particularly have developed and focused our research on, because we believe that integrated organizations perform better. Because we believe all aspects of the organization need to be brought into the culture, and so, as a consequence, need to be interconnected. And finally, the outside layer that you can see shows the organizational processes and procedures. And they're the type of things that we've got to encounter every day. You know, the policies and procedures within which we carry out our roles. And we have to ensure, and this is the important part, we've got to ensure that those processes are robust, and at the same time, they can't be so interfering with the ease of doing business in the entity. That balance has got to be achieved. They can't be too robust so as that they become stifling, and yet what is critical is that they can't, once set properly, they can't be bent, they can't be circumvented, because if they can be circumvented and are circumvented, in actual fact, it would be better if they didn't exist at all, because where they are being perpetually circumvented, they in actual fact provide a fig leaf to hide corruption or bad practice within that organization or entity. People make decisions and people construct the culture. And we believe as a consequence, HR practice is a key in defining an organizational's culture, because it is all about people. And so the things we say that are important around that are training, making sure that there's good training, making sure that the reward structures are appropriate around the human resource, and making sure that the hierarchy is appropriate and that there's appropriate delegation within it. You will not have an enlightened corporate culture if you don't have strong human resource practices. I want to talk a little bit about risk-taking and transparency. And it's more important in public interest entities, particularly. Because I referred to banks earlier, and an economy can't operate without a banking system. And so, of course, if they are in trouble, they become what's known as too big to fail. And so they can't be allowed to foolishly set aside the risk and to set the risk appetite themselves. And in some countries, this has led to a segregation of investment banking from retail and deposit holding. Unfortunately, less than a decade after the horrific collapse of banks, starting in the US and moving to other economies, some governments are rolling back on these protections and controls. And I think as a global body and as business people, we have called it out, and we will continue to call it out, that the relaxing of regulations to that extent may not be in the public interest. Organizations need to hold people to account. And that's, I think, something that will resonate with you. It's about, is there ever anybody held to account when something goes wrong? But we also say, to err is human. We also, everybody in this room knows, technology can err. Sometimes we try to turn on our computer and it doesn't start. So we just won't always say that to err is human. It also happens with technology. But when err is human, I believe we have to aim for a no-blame improvement culture. And that is where error is genuine, because I believe that builds a culture of learning, a culture of building of trust, and it leads to mistakes that occur not being intentionally hidden. Where error is intentional, well then I say do differently. Where error is unintentional, I say try and foster in your organizations a culture of no blame, a culture of learning. On sustainability, when enterprises think of sustainability, I would ask that you think about the timelines that you set yourselves around your strategy and your goals. You won't achieve your goals tomorrow or next month, so you shouldn't decision make in the short term. Enterprises need to be more conscious than ever on sustainability around them in the external environment. And I believe the accountancy profession will lead accounting for natural and social capital in the years to come. A fair and scientific calculation of our impact on society is one which absolutely the business community, government and society badly needs sooner rather than later, so that there can be a true scientific comparison of the impact that enterprise has, not just financial impact, but the societal impact. And I really believe that that's an area where the accounting profession is going to have more and more focus into the future. As I briefly mentioned, interconnectedness is about boards, executive not working in silos. It's making sure decisions are not developing and divisions are not developing their own cultures within an organization. It is about not working in silos. It is about having an enterprise-wide culture and not one that applies to each and every division therein. So let me bring my matters to a conclusion. All businesses need to test their cultures frequently, because even good cultures can worsen if they're not maintained healthily. That's why at ACCA we are proud to develop and to propagate this corporate culture diagnostic toolkit. And I hope that through the examples I've given and the presentation, that it has reinforced to you the importance which ACCA puts around the health of corporate culture and the importance of good corporate governance to the businesses that we are associated with. Thank you very much.
Brian, thank you, and I hope that organizations like yours have managed to make some sort of meaningful change to the corporate culture that led us into the Great Crash. Because if not, we're all in trouble. Again.